And how do everyone, and welcome to the Real Estate Radio Show featuring Chris Lofthus of the Chris Lofthus Group. That is it, Keller Williams Realty in Boise. We hope you are having a, hot weekend.
Yeah, slightly hot.
How are you, my friend?
I'm excellent. How are you doing, David?
Well, Kevin Miller did an admirable job. In fact, I saw him in the lobby this Saturday just finishing up his show, and then I saw you, and I thought I'd been replaced on a permanent basis, but we want to thank Kevin Miller for all his help last week, and more than anything, it looks to me like, Chris, and I'm asking you, it's been a pretty good summer for real estate. Is that true nationwide? Is the real estate rebound for real is the topic of our show today?
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about what's going on. I always kind of mention, nationally that I don't like people looking at national numbers, but overall it's not a horrible thing to look at, and I just wanted to kind of touch base on what's going on nationally so people can see that it truly is on the rebound. And everyone's always asking me, is real estate really on the rebound? For sure. And if you look at nationally, if you look at from December of last year, late 2011 to now, overall, about 4% nationally, housing is up. But if you look locally here, we're about 12% from 139,000 last year to 158,000 this year. So we're basically beating the rest of the, Boise itself in general, Ada County is beating the rest of the country almost in double digits.
Okay, so the question is, why is that? I mean, obviously we've got a lot of growth going on here, but there's other parts of the country that have some growth going on. As the expert analyst that I say you are, Chris, especially in the real estate business, why do you see that happening here?
We talk a lot about, true appreciation or market correction. We've seen a market correction as most of those, that 12% mostly market correction, just because I think, my feeling is regionally here around here in the valley, the banks really kind of jumped the gun a little bit compared to other states and other areas due to the fact of where they put, they were accepting short sales. They were putting the bank-owned properties on the market. So it was really kind of hurt us. And that's why I kind of mentioned market correction and the shift of it coming back up. So you look in other areas, we talk about Las Vegas a lot. You talk about Phoenix. You look at Las Vegas, and I really believe in my heart of hearts that the federal government told the banks to say, hey, we'll pull these houses off the market. The market down there has been hurt enough. So now I think you're seeing more trickle effect. Now they're starting to put them on the market, but it's showing up everywhere, which is always a good sign.
It was interesting because your show, I can't speak nationwide, at least statewide. I was in Coeur d'Alene last week, and my sister's looking for homes. She goes, hey, I listened to that Chris Lofthus show. What are things I should look for in a realtor? Because obviously I would like to recommend you, but
sure,
since she's up in Coeur d'Alene,
a little far for us.
But what are things that you would tell our listeners? Obviously, your job is to make the experience great for everyone. So what would you start out? What would you say, Chris, are probably 2 or 3 questions you need to ask when you're looking for a realtor?
Well, we do too. We have a special report that we use, the top 10 questions to ask your realtor before you buy or sell a house. But, for the most part, you look for, in our industry, we always talk about the 80-20 rule. You got 20% of the people doing all the business. Well, ours is a lot different. Ours is about 5 or 6% of us doing about 95% of all real estate transactions, and that's pretty standard across the board. But you want to get with a true professional. You want to get with somebody, call a title company and see who's doing the transactions, who's got a lot of volume. And I always talk about testimonials, that kind of stuff. But you need to ask. You need to ask about people's past clientele list and who they've worked with. So if you want, like I said, I always tell them to reach out to us and ask on the website. And that can send you the report, but it's just for the most part, like we're going to talk with Burton Friesz from Burton Friesz Remodeling, and we talk about him and just being like, you can count on him, and you can count on him doing the right thing, honest, ethical, and so on.
Chris, would you ask? And this is what I've learned from working with you the last year on the show. Would you ask them about their team? Because I think it's important that you say, hey, do you know or work with a great remodeler?
Right.
Do you know a great or work with a great landscaper? Do you have a great lender? Do you have a great title company? I would think, because I'm good at marketing.
Right.
I'm good at sales coaching. But when it comes to real estate, I need you to take care of everything from the trees to my new kitchen to maybe some plumbing to
right.
Furnace. I think that'd be a great question. Is it?
Well, yeah, and you're exactly right. It's not just my team. We always talk about the Chris Lofthus group and Jerry and Annette and Travis and everyone that we work with. It's not just the real estate side of things. We talk about Burton and he can handle anything that we need to remodel or whatever. You said plumber, and so we have a whole. We call them preferred vendors, and we have there are a whole list on our website. But it's even that portion of the team that's important when you're buying or selling real estate, and we go beyond. So we're just not there till the close, and then you're off and running on your own. We're there for you. We get people calling all the time and asking for, like you said, plumbers, electricians, whatever you need for your house. We have great vendors that surround us.
Chris, what if, and I want to ask you about, I don't know if we say different generations or different age groups, but we talked a little bit about this with you and your wife and parents moving here. Are there certain things if your mom and dad are talking, and I'm talking about moms and dads in that late 60s, 70, in that neighborhood, they're still home with each other. Is there certain questions that they should ask that would be different than, say, the 30 or 40-year-old couples?
Yeah, well, a lot now. We're seeing a lot of these baby boomers. They have a lot of money, and they do. And we'll talk a little bit in the fourth segment how I'm kind of seeing them not just affecting what's going on with the baby boomers themselves personally, but we're seeing now they're making moves to where they're helping their kids out, and so it's a big shift. We're talking about we're seeing so many cash offers now. We had one just yesterday, great one, and I was somewhat shocked a little bit when it came across the desk, but there's a lot of money floating around out there, and so we're not seeing the baby boomers themselves. We deal with them differently because their questions aren't the same concerns as like a first-time home buyer, where they're saying, how much do I have to put down now? Regulations are always changing, so that, yeah. And I always say over and over again, just reach out to us, call Annette, call me, and we'll give you all the information you need.
Yeah, and we keep talking about the first names. Let's start with Annette, who produces this show, but her full-time job is kind of making sure. I always say she's the verbal mortar between the bricks of knowledge. You want to have somebody that's really organized,
right,
and takes care of the details, and I'd say she's the guru of details.
Well, that's the biggest thing we do in the Chris Lofthus group. We talk about, we have a team around us, and Annette's our executive assistant, and we have Jerry Kelly and Travis Jeffers, and they're client specialists for us. And so we have kind of every hole plugged. So, we don't have the problems that say an individual realtor might have trying to run around showing property, trying to list a house, trying to deal with escrows. So we can have every hole plugged. And like last night, when you called me and you asked me about a lender, and that's kind of what we talk about. We surround ourselves. And so I want to refer you off to somebody that's going to take a great care of you and Claudia and your family and get you the right, whether it's the right loan or the right refi. That's where I think where we come in to play, especially in the real estate world.
You're listening to the Real Estate Radio Show featuring Chris Lofthus of the Chris Lofthus Group at Keller Williams Realty in Boise. Our special guest today is Burton Friesz of Burton C. Friesz Bath and Kitchen Remodeling and Improvements. You've heard him on the show a couple of times, and great to have Burton on. He'll be joining us on the program, so if there's any remodeling questions or tips or items you might want, plus his special, I call it the fatal flaws of remodeling, but he's got a special white paper that you can ask for, and we'll talk more about that. And Chris, you're kind of touching today on, is that real estate rebound for real as we get ready to start school? It appears that it is.
Yeah, what's been really great about this year is typically, we do most of our volume of business in the fourth quarter, which is kind of overflow, when the closings happen in, October, November. And we've seen a really good push, so it's been really solid. It's which I like. I wish we had more inventory, which we don't. New construction is booming. Commercial real estate's booming all over the valley here. A lot of new good companies moving in, but we talk about just in general, and I wanted to touch on this before Burton comes on here. We talk again about vendors and people you surround yourself with, and I think it's so important. I want to hit on it really hard again because what Burton's going to touch on here is what. The pitfalls, we've discussed it before, but he has the 7 tips to a successful remodel. And I just think that those type, we talk about just vendors in general. And I think it's really important to understand, like, we at Chris Lofthus Group put our stamp of approval on Burton. I can send him to a job. Don't ever have to even make a phone call. Typically the people will call me and thank us.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we said, again, when you ask questions, when you're looking for a realtor, it's more than just somebody that puts a sign in your yard. It's somebody that takes that house and says it's our home for a long time. Hey, Chris, I'd like to have some new trees back here. Who do I talk to? Hey, Chris, we're thinking about putting a swimming pool. And then conversely, I want to make sure my closing and, more than anything, your job's about referrals and recommendations. Do you know anybody that could use a great realtor? Absolutely. My folks are moving in from Arizona. They need to talk to the Chris Lofthus Group.
Yeah, and I tell people all the time, when people come to me, and they people do leave the area. It's not that I'm just all pro Boise and what we have going here, but I tell people all the time, I said, hey, you know what, if your mom and dad, if they're moving to San Diego, or they're moving to New York or whatever, we have I can make phone calls for them, and I can interview agents for them in other areas and kind of find out for them, what's going on, what kind of realtor are they, and I can kind of marry them up with personality types, and it really works out well.
Good stuff from Chris Lofthus. You can reach out to Chris. Simply send him an email at contact us at CLG. That's in Chris Lofthus Group Eagle.com. That's contact us at clgeagle.com. Check out his website, Chris Lofthus, ChrisLofthus.com, or simply place a call, 350-6228, 350-6228. When we come back, Burton Friesz will be back to talk about kitchen, bath remodeling, and all sorts of improvements that you can do to your home, either to improve the value, but more than anything, I want to tell him a story about my 12-year-old nephew, what he said to me. He'll get a kick out of this story when we come back, talking about remodeling on the Real Estate Radio Show featuring Chris Lofthus of the Chris Lofthus Group right after this.